Welcome to the deep dive. This one is really custom tailored for you. As a professional sports psychologist, as a lead pedagogue, your entire mission is engineering elite performance.
Mm-hmm.
So we've synthesized a whole stack of expert sources on, the neuroscience of skill acquisition, the stages of learning, and the psychological levers of motivation.
Right.
Our goal today is to give you those essential, actionable insights, the things you need to structure development for maximum efficiency and retention.
It's a mission that's really focused on tracing an athlete's fundamental journey. We're talking
Mhm.
about moving from the moment performance is clumsy and conscious and really effortful.
Yeah, that clunky starting phase.
Exactly. All the way to that highly efficient, almost subconscious, automated state that, we often call flow.
Exactly. And that shift, it's not just about getting faster or stronger. It's a categorical restructuring of how the mind manages movement.
The brain is literally rewriting its own software.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's dive into the three core stages of learning that really define this evolution: cognitive, associative, and autonomous.
The cognitive stage, well, that's where every single athlete starts. You can think of it as the getting your feet wet phase.
Mm-hmm.
All the sources really emphasize that this stage requires intense mental focus. The athlete is just grappling with the fundamental question of what to do.
It almost sounds like a massive bottleneck in the brain's information processing system.
It is.
They're taking in all this visual, all this sensory info, trying to perceive it, then formulate a response. And that leads to that characteristic slow decision-making.
And the high error rates, the jucky, hesitant movements you see in every novice,
Right.
That's precisely it. Because that internal model is so weak, they have to rely almost overwhelmingly on external guidance.
You mean things like visual demonstrations, verbal cues?
Visual, verbal, manual positioning, even mechanical aids. And this is where feedback becomes absolutely critical.
Okay, and the sources are very clear that at this stage, the feedback has to be extrinsic. But for our listener who already knows the definitions of KR and KP, let's get into the nuance. Does the timing of that feedback matter more than the content during this early cognitive phase?
Oh, it absolutely does. In the cognitive stage, the learner needs immediate, frequent feedback to even establish that stimulus-response bond.
Okay.
We are focusing heavily on knowledge of results, or KR, did the ball go in? And knowledge of performance, KP, was the movement pattern correct?
And which one is more important at the start?
Well, that's the interesting part. KR might be more motivating, telling them the outcome was good, but it's the KP, the knowledge of performance, that actually helps them refine that internal model.
I see. So if the feedback is delayed or it's sporadic, they're just reinforcing the wrong movement patterns in between.
You're setting them back. Precisely.
So if cognitive is about building the basic map with heavy external help, then the next stage, the associative stage, that must be about, route optimization. This is where the athlete starts to become dangerous.
It really is. It's the phase of refinement, of consistency. When an athlete enters the associative stage, their error rate just drops significantly.
And the movements get smoother.
Smoother, more coordinated. They start moving away from relying on constant visual and verbal cues because they're beginning to self-correct using intrinsic feedback.
But still consciously, right?
Still consciously. They
Yeah.
stop asking, where do I put my feet? And they start asking, how can I execute this more efficiently under pressure?
So they're moving from just understanding the concept to actually practicing the execution until it becomes repeatable.
Exactly. The mental effort is still high, but it's shifting. It's shifting from figuring out the macro steps to fine-tuning all the micro elements. They're linking the sensory input to the correct response, making that association stronger, which minimizes the processing lag we saw back in the cognitive phase.
So this is where that high-volume, repetitive practice really pays off,
Huge dividends.
which makes the transition to the autonomous stage even more fascinating. That's the state of ultimate efficiency, that flow state that veterans live in, where performance feels instinctive. How does the body shift from associating movements to fully automating them?
Well, when they hit the autonomous stage, skills are performed with exceptional control, with fluency, and critically, this is all maintained even when external pressure is extreme.
And the key mechanism for that have to be a total reliance on intrinsic feedback.
Completely. They don't need the coach in that moment. They use kinesthesis, just the feel of their body, to instantly self-correct.
The physiological engine driving this, though, it isn't magic. It's stored programming. So let's clarify this for our listener. We talk a lot about motor programs and schema theory. How do those two concepts work together to create an autonomous athlete?
Okay, so think of a motor program as the fundamental pre-coded file. It's the generalized series of nerve impulses delivered to the muscles, all organized into a sequence of subroutines.
Like the blueprint for throwing a dart, it's stored.
Exactly, it's the basic blueprint.
And the beauty of elite adaptation, that comes from schema theory, which acts like the software that modifies that blueprint in real time.
Precisely. Schema theory gives the athlete this internal rule set they need to modify that generalized motor program to fit, the infinite number of changing environmental demands.
So if the wind picks up or the ball's a little wet, the athlete doesn't have time to consciously invent a new throw.
No time at all. They rely on their schema.
Those sources outline 4 key components of this internal loop. Can we contextualize those 4 rules for the listener?
Absolutely. So when an autonomous athlete steps up to perform, they instantly process first the knowledge of initial conditions. This is the context, where they are, the distance, all the external elements.
Okay.
Second, they determine the knowledge of response specifications, how much force, what trajectory, what direction is needed. They execute.
And then?
Third, they instantaneously feel the sensory consequences. That's the kinesthetic intrinsic feedback. And fourth, they compare that feeling to the intended response outcome. That whole loop happens so fast it's subconscious.
And that allows the motor program to be adapted instantly.
That continuous internal modification, that is the schema in action. And that right there is the definition of an elite autonomous performer.
That's the ultimate goal of any pedagogue, isn't it? To build a self-correcting internal system that bypasses that information processing bottleneck completely.
It's the whole journey, from needing external input in the cognitive stage to refining the internal process in the associative to fully automating the response through kinesthesis and schema in the autonomous.
Right. Okay, let's widen the lens a bit. Once a single skill is mastered, we have to consider how it affects the massive inventory of other skills an athlete needs. We're talking about transfer of learning.
The effect of learning skill A on the learning of skill B.
And this is a vital area for practice design.
Oh, it's huge. If you ignore transfer, you might inadvertently be teaching an athlete, 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
So the ideal scenario is obviously a positive transfer.
Of course. That's where the common components of skill A actively assist in learning skill B. A lot of foundational agility work, for instance, falls right into this category.
But the real danger zone for coaches is negative transfer. That's where the motor program for one activity actively interferes with the mechanics you need for a new one.
A classic example the sources mention involves racket sports. If a tennis player moves to, say, table tennis, the subtle differences in the grip, the wrist action, the timing for a tennis forehand can actively hinder their ability to execute the specific wrist snap needed for a high-level table tennis shot.
Until they can suppress that old motor program.
Right, and it takes concentrated effort to break that established pattern. It's why negative transfer can be so frustrating for everyone involved.
We should also briefly note zero transfer, no effect at all, and the time-based ones. Proactive transfer, where skill A influences a future skill, and retroactive, where learning a new skill changes how you do an old one.
All of those are relevant, for sure. But for maximizing efficiency in high-performance settings, we have to focus heavily on bilateral transfer.
This is where learning a skill with one limb transfers to the other limb.
Exactly. The learning of a skill from one limb transfers benefits or aids the learning of the same skill in the opposite, non-dominant limb.
So learning a complex passing drill with your right foot provides neural patterning benefits that actually speed up the process when you switch to the left foot.
That's it. The brain has already coded the general sequence, the motor program, and a lot of the muscle memory is already established. It makes subsequent learning faster.
And this must be incredibly relevant for things like injury rehab.
Incredibly. It means the athlete can continue to practice movement patterns with the unaffected limb, maintaining that neural coding even when the injured limb is immobilized.
So for our listener, the core implication of understanding all these transfer types, it has to be in practice design. It means training can't be generic.
Absolutely not. It has to be highly specific. The coach must proactively engineer the training environment to optimize positive transfer.
They're making sure practice looks like the real game.
Exactly. And at the same time, take steps to limit negative transfer. If your drills contain elements that conflict with game mechanics, you are literally training the athlete to perform incorrectly when it matters most.
Specificity in training is the antidote to negative transfer.
It's a key.
That attention to detail is what separates a routine coach from an elite pedagogue. And, speaking of the long term, all this talk about skill acquisition is moot if the athlete just loses the will to train. Motivation is the long game. So what does this deep dive tell us about long-term adherence? Why is that internal drive so essential?
Well, motivation determines everything. It determines whether an athlete sustains the high effort and high volume of training needed over years. And we distinguish, of course, between intrinsic motivation.
The drive from within, joy, personal achievement.
Exactly. And extrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from outside sources.
And that's broken down further into the tangible rewards, money, prizes, trophies, and the intangible rewards like praise or recognition.
Right. And the sources all strongly affirm that while extrinsic factors can, get someone to start, it's intrinsic motivation that's the real key to sustained high-level performance and resilience.
Resilience against burnout.
Absolutely. When an athlete feels genuine satisfaction in mastering a complex skill or just the joy of team camaraderie, that internal reward system is infinitely more robust than any external payment.
But in professional sports, tangible extrinsic rewards are everywhere.
Yeah.
Salaries, endorsements, championships. How does a professional coach manage those without damaging that internal drive?
This is the critical, delicate balance. The research points to a potential downside called the overjustification effect.
Okay.
If an athlete who once just loved the competition starts getting massive financial rewards, their own self-perception can shift.
They stop attributing their effort to the internal satisfaction of mastery.
And instead, they attribute it solely to the external reward. They stop playing for fun and start playing for the paycheck.
Which means if those rewards shrink, or if training gets tough and the paycheck doesn't feel like enough compensation, their motivation just collapses.
Exactly. And this is why coaches and psychologists have to strategically leverage the intangible extrinsic rewards. Things like sincere praise and public recognition.
To strengthen the stimulus-response bond through positive reinforcement.
Right. That positive reinforcement validates the athlete's effort. It increases their sense of competence, which in turn feeds back into and strengthens their intrinsic drive. It doesn't corrupt it.
So you're nurturing that internal fire by validating the process, not just rewarding the outcome.
That's the goal. Use the external environment to foster internal satisfaction and self-efficacy. That way, when the chips are down, they keep showing up because they fundamentally love the feeling of mastery.
That internal drive is the non-negotiable prerequisite for any kind of enduring success.
It truly is.
This has been an incredibly deep dive. We've traced the athlete's evolution through the 3 stages of learning: cognitive, associative, and autonomous. We've explored the neural architecture of motor programs and schema.
And we've also dug into the critical implications of transfer of learning, really emphasizing that need to plan for bilateral transfer and limit those negative effects.
And this depth of knowledge is what moves you beyond just generic training plans. It empowers you to become a coach or pedagogue who genuinely engineers human performance.
I think so, yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
The ultimate challenge for a coach isn't just teaching a skill. It's designing an environment that maximizes positive transfer across all skills and, maybe most importantly, proactively protects that athlete's intrinsic drive against the pressures of high-level competition.
That's the art and the science of it.
Understanding the stages of the mind is the secret to elite coaching. Find the full Mastery Suite at revisedirect.com.